If you guys remember, back in 2022, just last year, either Elon or Tesla, it was one of them for sure, that said that they're going to do a buyback for sure, whether we hit in a recession or not in 2023. Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, I even put it on my Twitter saying that I'm starting to believe that Tesla may not do a buyback this year, given the announcement. Bruh. Anyways, given the announcement of the new Gigafactory and many investments needed to transition to sustainable energy, as per Investor Day, I believe a buyback probably won't be a good idea at this time. So, when is a good time for Tesla to do a buyback? Because eventually, they're going to be making so much money into the future, 3, 4, 5 years. As we keep going forward in the future, Tesla's going to be racking in money. The question is, when are they going to do a buyback? It's not an if, it's when buyback. And in today's video, that's what exactly we're going to be figuring out. And I'm really excited because I took a few hours, actually half a day, to figure this out, looking at other companies and how they start doing buybacks. And it was a very interesting finding, and I'm very excited to share with you guys today. So all I ask for return, man, is a like and subscribe if you haven't already, man. Let's go. So the first question I asked myself, what are the criteria to do a buyback? First, like, what initiates a company to do a buyback? Is it the cash? Is it the cash flow? Is it the confidence that they're going to continue making money? Because doing buybacks is a long-term commitment. It's really hard to see companies who do a buyback once and stop. So really, Tesla, I think once they start doing a buyback, they're going to continue doing a buyback like Apple, like Oracle, like Google. And those are the examples that I'm going to be showing today, pretty much using them as a criteria on when Tesla's going to do their buyback. And the findings were really interesting. So check this out. Let's start off with Apple. Apple first started doing their buyback back in 2013. Now, what they had at that time, they had $40.5 billion in cash. Assets, they had over $200 billion. Liabilities, over $83 billion. That would give an assets to liability ratio of 2.5, which is great because they can pay off their liabilities more than 2 times. Then for revenue, they had almost $171 billion. For profits, they had $37 billion, and for cash flow, $45.5 billion. So you can see just from the cash flow itself that doing a buyback would make sense. But let's look at Oracle. Oracle, they first did their stock split, meaningful stock split that they continued for a long time up until today was 2012. Prior to this, they were doing it, but it wasn't until 2012 that they kept it constant. And with that, they had almost $31 billion in cash. Again, high cash, like in the 40 billions. Asset, $78 billion. Liabilities, $34 billion. Assets to liabilities, less than Apple's, but still really good, more than double. Revenue of $37 billion. Profits of almost $10 billion. I mean, Tesla's doing more than that in terms of revenue and profits at the time Oracle initiated a buyback. But what's more important here is the cash flow. Over $13 billion. So that's very interesting. We'll compare these to Tesla at the end after we do Google, because Google is very interesting as well. Google, they didn't start doing a buyback up until recently, 5 years ago in 2018. And they had a cash position of over $100 billion, assets of over $275 billion, liabilities over $55 billion. Check this out. Assets to liability ratio 400%. That is beyond healthy. It's crazy. Google is one of the best investments out there, man. If it's a good long-term hold, is definitely Google, and their balance sheet is absolutely stunning. For revenue, they had almost $137 billion, profits over $30 billion, and cash flow almost $23 billion. That's pretty interesting. And you know what? Google, they initiated a $90 billion repurchase of stock or buyback in 2023. So I mean, that should tell you everything about the company right there. $90 billion. That's insane. Now let's go ahead and see what Tesla is doing. I'm going to take the 2022 full year of it because that gives us a better picture. Tesla in 2022, they had over $22 billion in cash. So it's not as much as Google, Oracle's, or Apple's, but that's still a lot of cash. Assets, over $83 billion. Liabilities, over $36 billion, making the assets to liabilities ratio the same as Oracle's. Great, you can pay it off twice, more than twice, but not as stunning as Google's. 400% is absolutely insane. Revenue, over $81 billion. Profits, a little over $12.5 billion. But look at this cash flow, $7.5 billion. You see this, guys? The cash flow is what dictates if a company is willing, is comfortable, and is able to do a buyback. If you guys can see, in Apple, Oracle, and Google, they had high cash flows and they were growing at a nice strong uptrend. If you look at Apple's cash flow today, it's insane what it is today. Same thing with Oracle's and same thing with Google's. Tesla at the moment, not really. This year, their cash flow is actually going to reduce, but next year is going to be absolutely fantastic. We're going to take a look at that in just a bit. Let's just go through how much they did a buyback, every company. Apple, they first started in 2013. They started the first year, $22 billion in buyback. The next year, over 44. Then 34, then 30, then 32, then 2018, $72 billion in buyback. No wonder Warren Buffett is extremely happy. Then 66 billion, then 72 billion again, then 86 billion, and then 2022, 90 billion. Kind of like what Google is doing this year. So that's a sheesh moment. That's a compounded growth of buybacks, 16.5% year over year. Sheesh! Let's move on to Oracle. Oracle in 2012, they did 5.1 billion in buyback. In 2013, they did 9.5 billion, then 7.7, then 6.3, then 9.1, then 1.65, then 9.5, then a massive jump, almost 35 billion in a buyback, then 18 billion, then 20 billion, then almost 17 billion. That's an annual compounding growth of 13% from 5.1 billion to 17 billion, which is pretty good. Now, Google surprised me the most. It was absolutely ridiculous. I'm not even taking the fact of 2013, man, because it's not finished. I'm just taking what they did. They started doing the first buyback in 2018 of over 8 billion. That was their first buyback. But then the year after that, they more than doubled their buyback to 18 billion. Then 28 billion. Then in 2021, 50 billion. 2022, 60 billion. And if you want to add this year, 2023, that's 90 billion. Let's forget 2023. From 2018 to 2022, that's a 64% growth. That's insane. That's crazy. Is Tesla going to do the same thing? We don't know. Let's go figure out when Tesla's going to do a buyback and how much. If you guys are ready, man, smash that like button. Let's go. Here is the Tesla stock price prediction chart. If you guys have been watching my videos for a long time or just recently, this chart should be very familiar. But if you guys want a great breakdown, it's going to take me a while to do it. So I recommend you to go check out this video when we'll Tesla do a stock split. I break this down one by one for you guys to understand exactly what's going on. And it's really straightforward, right? So if you guys want the full breakdown, check out this video. And it's a very interesting video because if you're a Tesla stock investor, I'm going all into Tesla stock. It's interesting to know when Tesla's going to do a stock split and, of course, a buyback too. So check out that video if you want more depth. If not, let's go. So as you guys can see right off the bat, I've already given the PE and the stock price prediction. And what's really important here, what gives this stock a more of an exponential growth is the FSD global revenue and profits. As you guys can see, from 2025 all the way to 2030, that's when Tesla's gonna, with the snap of a finger, gonna do that one quick software update for all the vehicles around the world who are able to initiate FSD in their respective countries that they approved it and regulated. So that's what this is all about. This may not actually happen, but I'm a very optimistic guy and I believe in Tesla so much that this will happen in Europe, Australia, Canada, right? This has to happen. I mean, the next evolution to driving is full self-driving and Tesla's leading the way, and give it a few more years. I mean, here I put 2025. That's when, for example, Canada can maybe get that approval that you can actually let your car drive, and then other, Western countries or developed countries that actually have roads you can drive on will give that okay. I mean, my first bet, the first city in the world that's gonna give this okay is Dubai, but that's just my opinion. But I do predict that 2025 is going to be the start of all this FSD stuff globally. So that's what that is. Other than that, this chart doesn't include robotaxi. It doesn't include bots because I personally don't know how to add them. I mean, I'll be making a separate video adding those, speculating to the max really. But in this one, I'm trying to keep it as realistic as possible. But obviously, it's all speculation. It's all a prediction. So none of this is going to become true. So don't take all this take all this with a grain of salt. But I'm trying to keep this as realistic as possible. I mean, for crying out loud, for 2030, I'm saying 13.6 million vehicles are going to be delivered. Everyone is saying 15 million above, 20 million. But I'm saying 13.6. Conservative, right? So yeah, take all this with a grain of salt. Now, moving on to figure out the free of cash flow, because that's what's needed to see if Tesla could do a buyback or not. And in order to do that, we got to figure out the net cash provided by operating activities. And looking at Tesla's earnings, I took what was needed and I gave it an average, and that's how I got the operating activities for 2023 all the way to 2030. And I know this is going to be wrong. Obviously, operating activities is going to increase more drastically, but we can't really know or predict these kind of stuff. But anyways, again, this is all speculation and all prediction. This is 100% going to be wrong. I'm just letting you know, all predictions are going to be wrong. Changes in assets and liabilities, I kept it at a standard of 4 billion every single year. Then this is how we get the net cash provided by the operating activities. We get the net income non-GAAP added to the operating activities and subtracted by the changes of assets and liabilities. And I did that for the entire decade, pretty much up until 2030. And look at that, 227 billion in net cash provided by operating activities. That's absolutely insane. But in order to find the cash flow, we gotta look at the capital expenditures, because this is where it gets very interesting. This is where we can get our answer of free cash flow. Doing some research, it looks like in 2023, Tesla's capital expenditure is going to be $7.4 billion. I think it's going to be a little bit more than that. They are having a gigafactory coming up, and Elon did say, Elon's guess, right? End of this year, there's going to be another factory announcement, and that's probably going to need another 5 billion, maybe 6-7 billion somewhere around the world. Even to Mexico, that's 5 billion. It's probably going to be 5.5 or even 6 billion. So really, this is going to be a lot more investment and capital needed for these things. But nonetheless, let's take what this report says and put $7.4 billion. And we subtract that by the net cash provided by operating activities. We get free cash flow of 6 billion, which is 1.5 billion less than 2022. So whoever said we're going to get a buyback this year, I don't care if it was Elon or not, it's not going to happen. If it does, I'll be a little bit concerned as an investor. Like, bro, you have lots of cash, but you need that to build things with it. If we're going to go into a recession into this year, if something's going to break and we all have to, embrace the market, I'm not comfortable with that, man. I would wait another year or two. If fear of cash flow is decreasing year over year, obviously next year is going to be monstrous, as we'll see in a bit. Not a good idea, especially when you're ramping up Texas and Berlin, and now, Mexico Gigafactory, and now you want to extend Shanghai. You need capital for that. And at the moment, I much prefer Tesla to put as much investments as they can to build as much gigafactories as they can, because it's this foundation that's going to make them so much money in the future. And then look at the FSD coming, and then the energy is doing its own thing, right? This year, I don't think there's going to be a buyback. Cash flow is less than last year. Any financial advisor or officer will go like, yeah, we probably, we shouldn't risk it this year. We should maybe look into it next year. And speaking about next year, which is 2024, I put here 8 billion in capital expenditures. I think there's going to be more capital needed because they're doing the lithium refinery in Texas, and there's probably going to be another gigafactory and expansion of gigafactories. So I think there's going to be more capital expenditures needed as we go forward. And with that, if we subtract it by the net cash provided by operating activities, we get over $15 billion in free cash flow. That's very similar to Oracle. So the question becomes now, will Tesla do a buyback in 2024? Well, let's see. In my opinion, I think to be conservative, they're going to skip 2024 as well. And they're going to do 2025. 2024 is a fantastic year. They're going to do almost 150 billion in revenue and 20 billion in net income GAAP, right? This is including taxes and all that kind of stuff. Non-GAAP is 21 billion. EPS is over $6. Flippin' insane. They're going to do almost 2.5 million vehicle deliveries with an average selling price of 48,000. And I put a 20% gross profits here for vehicles. So with all that, over 15 billion in free cash flow, that's record for Tesla. They've never done this before. It's gonna be the same story next year. And speaking of next year in 2025, I put capital expenditures of 8.25 billion, just $250 million on top of that. And really, I did that for every single year as well. So if we drag that out, by 2030, that's 9.5 billion in capital expenditures. Most likely it's gonna be more than that. I reckon it's gonna be more than that, but just keeping it very simple. And if we go ahead and just do the math here to get the free cash flow for all years, look at that. 2025, over 32 billion. 2026, over 53 billion. 2027, over 78 billion. Then 113 billion. Then 159 billion. And then 217 billion for free cash flow in 2030. That's crazy. And if they're still not doing buybacks, then I'm going to be really mad. Heck, I'm saying the buyback they're going to do is going to be in 2025. Look at this. Over $32 billion in free of cash flow. That's more than Google's. That's absolutely more than Google's. It's in between Apple and Google. That is a sheesh moment right there. And if Tesla doesn't do a buyback in 2025, as a Tesla investor, as someone's going all into Tesla stock, I'm going to be a little bit frustrated because that's a lot of cash flow. And they're going to have a lot of cash on hand. So there's really no excuse for them to not do a buyback in 2025. That's just my opinion. If they do a buyback in 2025, sorry, not if, when they do a buyback in 2025, how much would they buy back? And what I did here is I guessed they're going to do $10 billion in buyback purchases. In 2022 or last year, there was a lot of speculation that Tesla may do a $5 billion buyback in 2022 or even in 2023, which I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, if it does, I'll be super shocked and I wouldn't be that happy, because they need the money for something else. But if they're doing over $32 billion in free cash flow, 10 billion, 30% of that should go into buyback purchases. And with that, if they do 10 billion, that's about over 16 million shares bought. And percentage of that is 0.5%. So let's go ahead and subtract 16 million from the shares outstanding diluted at the moment. Now the formula here is a little tied together, so the number may change, but just focus on that number, 16.673. So let's subtract that. And yes, we are diluting as well while we're doing this because there's still going to be stock-based compensation and Elon's probably going to sell some more in the future. So that's also going to happen, but the buyback is going to surpass that. So it won't really matter as much. So let's go ahead and subtract it. Bam. Look at that. So not much of a difference, really only $3 in the stock. That's the only difference there is. But nonetheless, that's what I think is going to happen in 2025. It's going to be a very bull sign. Maybe the PE may go to 60 because of that. Who knows? In 2026, I'm saying $15 billion in buyback. That would be close to 18 million shares bought. Again, 0.5%. Let's go ahead and subtract that from the shares outstanding diluted. Bam. So only a $5 difference. Still a difference. And as you guys can see, shares outstanding is dipping lower and lower, which is fantastic. And around this time, 2026 or even 2027 is when I think the next stock split's gonna happen. Again, if you guys haven't watched that video, I already put a card over here. Link will be in the description when Tesla will do the next stock split. 2025 to 2027 are going to be exciting years for Tesla, and I just can't wait. Sheesh. Now, moving on to 2027, I'm saying here, I mean, if they're doing close to 80 billion in free cash flow, they should do a buyback repurchase of $20 billion. That would be almost 19 million in shares bought, which is again 0.5%. Again, I think this is going to be more of an exponential growth, but I'm keeping these first 3 years of buybacks very light. Stock goes from 1,069 to 1,065 bucks per share. So that is awesome. That is absolutely flipping awesome. Moving on to 2028, I decided to become a little more aggressive here with the buyback because again, if they're doing close to 114 billion in free cash flow, at least 35 billion of that should go towards a buyback. I mean, comment down below if you guys agree or disagree, but I think, I mean, come on. You know, 30, what are you going to do with 14 billion in free cash flow, man? Come on, just imagine your cash position. Then it's going to be close to Apple. It's absolutely insane. That would be close to 26 million shares bought, and percentage of shares will be 0.8%. So let's go ahead and subtract that. Stock price goes from 1348 to 1358. So 10 bucks slaps on, which is awesome. In 2029, I said a buyback repurchase of $50 billion. I mean, look, you're doing $160 billion in free cash flow. 50 billion, come on. I think that makes sense. And that would be over, almost reaching 31 million in shares bought, which will be close to 1% of what the shares outstanding is. From 1627, we get 1642. So that makes a difference, much more difference than the previous years. But let's move on to 2030 when they have over 217 billion free cash flow. I'm saying a buyback repurchase of 65 billion. Now this is going to be closer to maybe 70, 80 billion, but 65 billion is what I put here to stay conservative. Over 34 million shares bought, and that's 1%. 1% of your total shares outstanding has been bought back. I think that's reasonable. I think reaching 1% by end of the year does make sense. From 1898 to 1916. Absolutely in flippin' insane. And as you guys can see, buybacks don't really make much of a difference in the stock price. Psychologically, it makes a massive massive difference. Most investors out there would prefer to buy stocks who are either buying back their shares or giving dividends or both. And in this case, if Tesla starts doing buyback, not only does it show optimism with the team that, hey, our stock's cheap, we know it's going to be worth more, a whole lot more in the future, but as an investor, they know that they're not going to get diluted, as we are right now. We Tesla investors at the moment, and for the past few years, and since the beginning, we've been getting diluted. But once Tesla does a buyback, I think more investors will flock to Tesla stock and obviously increase the price even higher, even maybe slapping on an extra 5 PE or a few PE here and there, all because of Tesla doing a buyback. This will give a lot of investors confidence that, hey, I'm not being diluted, I'm guaranteed to make a return on this stock because the company themselves are buying it, and the management is confident that their stocks and their company is going to continue growing. So 100% we're going to see more valued investors come into Tesla stock once they do a buyback. Again, the question was when? I'm guessing 2025, man. 2025. I mean, let's see what happens. I mean, again, 2025, if they do over 30 billion in cash flow, they have to do some sort of they just have to. You're guaranteed to continue racking in money. Why not just do a buyback, right? Even heck, next year, 2024, is possible for them to do a buyback. I mean, 15 billion in free cash flow, more than, I mean, almost tripling from 2020 to 2024. So really, we got to wait and see, but I have my money bet on 2025 that there's going to be a lot of great news when Tesla says, we're going to do 10 billion, heck, even 5 billion to start off is okay of a buyback. I think that's going to be major news. I think we're going to see massive rallies then. But again, this is all speculation, all prediction. This may not happen. They probably won't ever do buyback, which is very, very low probability. But you should take all this video with a grain of salt and nothing less and nothing more. Always do your DD and your research. Now, you know what else is crazy, guys? Tesla doing a buyback in 2025 or even 2026. And at the same time, there is a stock split. That will be a crazy day for Tesla. But let's see when exactly Tesla will do a stock split. Wait a minute, I've already made that video right here. Check it out. You guys will be disappointed. I dive deep in there just like how I did here. So you're definitely going to find some value there. Support the channel by becoming a channel member, man. And subscribe if you haven't already, man. I shall see you guys in the next video. See ya.